I'm back again, once again, and this time with a Cyberpunk 2077 early build guide video. What I have for you today is V. Obviously, you can't really change the name. V's the name, but what you can do is change her actual name in your head for lore purposes. So right here before you, we have Valencia, and she is our death-dealing Shinigami. I picked corporate for her primarily. Because I wanted to test out the corporate lifestyle. However, you can decide what background you want for her, as that's not really important to the situation. For lore purposes though, we decided to go with corporate, and here's why. So V is ruthless. She's been ruthless because she was raised in the corporate lifestyle. She is taught to take all of her problems head on and let nothing stop her ascension to the top of the corporate ladder. So with that in mind, V took it quite literally, and she's become one of the most ruthless employees in Arasaka. Until one day, she was found out and she was deemed excommunicado, kicked from the company. She joined the street life with her friend Jackie Wells, who she'd been feeding Arasaka information to for quite some time. As I've stated before, V takes everything personally, so this guide will be a melee focused guide. With that being said, and without further ado, here is the build. So when you get to the character creation screen and you create V however you want it, with the background however you want it, nomad, street brawler, corporate, the next step is to decide attributes. Attributes are going to be essential to how you start the game. What I recommend is to max out 6 points into body and 6 points into reflex at the start. Once again, this is not an end game build, this is an early game build to tell you some of the necessary perks that you will need to make this build viable. As when I'm using this build, I'm able to one-shot almost anything. Even the higher end police, NCPD, who have been completely decked out in chrome, I can still one-shot them. Why do I recommend 6 body and 6 reflex to start? Well, simply put, if you come over here in the body tree and we go to athletics, which is the first tree in the body tree out of 3 trees, I'm saying tree quite a lot, I'm going to say subclass from now on. However, athletics is the first subclass. The main perks to start out with, in my honest opinion, is you want to put 1 into regeneration, because you're going to need that in combat regen. As your melee, you won't be taking cover as much, so the extra regen is vital to your success. Then you're going to come down, sorry about that, forgot to put my phone on silent. But then you're going to come down here and you're going to grab Invincible, which is a passive that is quite essential to a melee build. The more health you have, the longer you can stay alive. So you want to max that out as soon as possible, followed by True Grit, which is another passive that increases stamina this time instead of health. These three perks are essential to the starting build for a melee focused character, in my honest opinion. The next step that you want to focus on is getting your body to a maximum of 12 so you can pick up the like a butterfly perk and cardio cure. These are important because dodging, you might want to dodge a lot, dodge bullets, dodge people, dodge around corner, dodge your life, dodge child support. Whatever you're trying to dodge from, this will allow you to dodge it infinitely. So that's a must have. But it's not a early game pickup, so you don't have to get it until you feel you are ready for it. As you'll find out, you don't really need to dodge if everybody's dead. This one, however, cardio cure is very important. It's not an early game pickup, but I'd recommend getting this before you get the dodge perk, only because moving faster regenerates health faster. That's a no-brainer. You're in melee combat all the time, so you're going to be running from your next target to your next target to the next target. Most of the time sprinting from target to target, so being able to regenerate that health faster is better. Cardio Cure works in conjunction with Regeneration, and I feel it's a must-have for what it's worth. Now, I haven't spec'd into any of these other subclasses like Brawlers because for this build I am not focused on blunt weapons, but if that's your thing, then Brawler is your subclass to spec into. The next thing I want to go over is Reflex. Once again, it's vital that you get Reflex to at least 11 as soon as possible, but that's right after you get Body to 12 as soon as possible. So if we had to put them in order, you want a body to 12, reflex to 11, and cool at least 6. Once again, this is an early game build. You can spec your character however you feel you need to spec your character, but these are the 3 recommended perks I would go for. Why reflex? Well, reflex has the blade subclass in it, which we're focused on as a Shinigami or a Soul Reaper. I am more focused on melee with blades, in this case a katana, because that's my melee weapon of choice, and this subclass will help me boost that. What do I recommend early on? Well, I recommend Sting Like a Bee. Sting Like a Bee is self-explanatory. Increase attack speed with blades by 30% when maxed out. Now, I don't know if you're not getting what I'm putting down here, but if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, allow me to pick it up for you. That 30% increase in speed means increased in damage. Means you're hitting more and you're doing more damage. That should be a no-brainer. The next perk I'd recommend getting straight off the back is Blessed Blade, which increases your crit by 20%. Your crit chance will increase by 20%. That goes hand in hand with Sting Like a Bee. If you're swinging more, if you're hitting more, you have a higher chance of getting crit. So those two go hand in hand. I recommend picking them up in that order: Sting Like a Bee, then Blessed Blade. The next early on perk I'd recommend getting is Strong Attacks with Blades deal 50% more damage, and I insist that you max that out. Max it out, max it out, max it out, because you're going to spend a lot of time in combat doing strong attacks, and that is basically how you're going to get 90% of your one-shot kills. Now, alongside the Blades perks, there's another perk in here that is not recommended, but I'm throwing it out there as a you can get it. You can get it, but not if you don't want to. It's a recommendation, a honorary perk, for example, and that perk would be over here. It's called Fury Blast. Now, I've stated before that your main melee weapon will be a katana. However, I do have the Mantis Blades, and sometimes I swap to it for lore purposes. Like I said, V likes to get up close and personal, so where a katana doesn't suffice, she pulls out her Mantis Blades and she strikes. Another reason to have the Mantis Blade, in case you guys don't know, in certain story missions, you will be stripped of all your weapons, and the mantis blade comes in handy because you don't need it, or it's not considered a weapon since it's part of your arms. So all you have to do is just pull out your mantis blade at any given time where you don't have your weapon, and bada bing, bada boom, you're slicing people up like normal. But that's a perk that you don't have to get. I find that the mantis blade still does sufficient damage without it, and these perks only increase it by 1% for level 1. So, it's just very on your taste. The next perk I'd recommend getting, however, is Flight of the Sparrow. This perk is vital to your playstyle because it reduces the cost of all attacks with blades. And since you're swinging your blades left and right, you're using stamina left and right. So having a way to reduce the cost of that is important. It allows you to swing more, and it allows you to stay in combat more, especially when you're sprinting from target to target. Having to use less stamina is vital. So I'd recommend getting that, followed by getting defensive attack with blades, which deals 300% more damage. That's important because when you time your defense right, let's say you're doing a melee with a melee person, especially if you're fighting a boss and they strike you, and you do your defense right and you get a parry off, it's gonna automatically do an animation, and that's gonna do 300 times more damage. So those are the recommended starter perks to get. Other honorary perks that I can think of is Crimson Dance for the bleed damage. Once again, if you're fighting a boss, he's gonna obviously not be able to get one shot as often. Some boss might, some boss don't. This is an early game setup. I haven't been able to test it, but being able to bleed them out to set them up for that one shot is something you'd look forward to. So getting Crimson Dance is good to have. You want to also get Stuck Pig because why not keep them bleeding, right? You start the bleed effect, just keep them bleeding. The longer they bleed is the more damage they take, and then not only are you doing bleed damage, but then you're doing the regular on hit damage, physical damage. So you have essentially 2 points of damage, and if your melee weapon has one of the upgrades that allow it to do poison or fire or even shock damage, then you can have 3 points of damage. 3 points of damage means they're taking more damage, which means they're dying faster. Especially on bosses, this can be vital. So stuck like a pig, or stuck pig, is crucial, and it comes in handy when you have Crimson Dance. Another perk that I recommend getting is DeathBolt. Why? Because when you kill an enemy with a blade, it restores 20% of your health and increases your movement speed by 30% for 5 seconds. That's huge. That's huge. Once again, you're in combat constantly. So that means that you're in combat constantly. So that means when you're swinging your blade around, which you are currently doing all the time, every time, and you're losing health because you're not taking cover, defeating an enemy, you're gonna get back 20% health. Huge. If you can, you can literally walk into combat with 100% health and walk out with 100% health if you do this right. And the movement speed works great for you because it allows you to move even faster during combat, moving from one target to the next. And it will mean you will have to sprint less, which means less consumption of stamina. Just saying, it's a huge perk to have, and I'd recommend it highly. Another perk I would recommend getting is BloodLust. While wielding a blade, recovers 7% health when applying bleeding to an enemy or hitting an enemy affected by bleeding. You get where I'm going with this. Not only is it another health recovery tool, but it works hand in hand with Crimson Dance and Stuck Pig. You can't ask for another way to recover health besides these two. These two will come in handy. DeathBolt and BloodLust probably gonna be a melee character's most vital thing when you're using a blade, of course, to health recovery. As you can see when I show you some of my gameplay, I'm constantly using stims, but That's because I don't have these perks. These are late game perks, and I am not. This is not a late game build. It's just some suggestions that I'm showing you for you to work your way through the trees and get some perks that I feel is vital to your playthrough. Another perk that I feel is vital to your playthrough is Judge, Jury, and Executioner, which increases damage with blades by 50% against enemies with max health. That's huge, especially if you decide to take your melee build into the stealth world. This is huge because everybody starts out with max health. Everybody. You're not going to go into a fight unless you use quick hand ahead of time and somebody has less than a max health. This is going to be huge, especially for those one-shot kills. You're going to be doing tremendous amount of damage. So I recommend also picking this up when you can. Obviously, you need to have reflex at, sorry, not reflex, yeah, no, reflex. You need to have reflex at 15 before you can pick this perk up. So this is another late game perk to grab. Late, not even late, it's a mid game perk to grab. So grab it when you can. It's going to be vital. I would even recommend grabbing it over grabbing Fury Blast, because once again, using the Mantis Blades is not a requirement for this build, it's just a preference. So you can decide whether you want to use it or not. And I find that even if you don't grab Fury Blast and you grab this over Fury Blast, your Mantis Blade will still be doing effective amount of damage with all the necessary perks that you've already grabbed from here, from the tree. Another perk to grab is Crimson Tide. You get where I'm going with this. Crimson Tide works well with Stuck Pig, which works well with Crimson Dance, which will help you with your health recovery with BloodLust. Why would you not pick this up? You have to pick this up whenever you can. Once again, this requires 18 perks or 18 attribute points spent into reflex before you can. However, when you can, get it. It's vital to your survival as a melee character. I keep telling you this because it's important. You need recovery so you can keep in the fight, especially against bosses. Another perk that you have to get, but this is a heavy investment, so I would even consider this even a late game perk to get, is Dragon Strike. Once again, vitally important to have a lot of critical strikes and a lot of critical damage. You want to hit someone and you want to see them die. You don't want to sit there and wail at them for 20 years before they die. So picking this one up, also important. It's a late game perk, so I wouldn't even worry about it until you're able to get your reflex to 20, which is the perk requirement. Those are just some perks that I recommend getting. It's not, entirely up to me. This is just suggestions and guides. You can obviously pick other perks up, like slow and steady. Now, I personally don't care too much about having increased armor while I'm moving, because the recovery perks, as I'm calling them, should suffice enough for you to maintain good health, and this should negate that. But if you want to be even tankier, I recommend going with that, and that actually works perfectly into my next segue of tankiness. The next tree is cool, and I recommend starting out with at least 5 points in the cool, or 4 points in the cool, sorry. Once you max out body and intelligence at body and reflex at 6, you'll have 1 perk point left over, and you just throw that in the cool. Why? Because you want to go over here to cool, and it has 2 subclasses. If you're going to be a stealth melee build, then stealth is your playstyle. However, or stealth is your subclass, sorry. However, this early game build isn't focused on stealth at all. This is just focused on going in there, killing everybody, walking out. So instead, we are looking to be more interested in the cold-blooded subclass. Why cold-blooded subclass? It's pretty simple. Like I said, sometimes you do need to be tanky until you can get those other skills. So what I'd recommend, dropping 1 point instantly. The first perk point you get, drop it into cool, or into cold-blooded, sorry. Why do I recommend dropping it in cold-blooded? It's just because after defeating an enemy, you gain a stack of cold-blooded, and it also increases your movement speed by 2 for up to 1 stack. So each stack will increase your movement speed when you upgrade the perk naturally. Now this is mainly just to throw in there. It's like a fire and forget type thing, so that way you can level up your cool. at the start, and you won't start actually putting more points into there until you can afford to put more points in there. But the reason being for that is because we want the crit chance that comes with perk progression. So you get the first 10% crit chance, and then on that you get an armor increase, you get a perk point to spend in the cool tree or any other tree you feel like. Then you get another perk point, health increase, stamina increase, resistance increase. So you see the benefit of actually getting your crew leveled up. And the good thing about this is if you throw your point into here ASAP, just playing the game naturally, every time you get into combat and you kill someone, it will go towards leveling up your cool. Mine is maxed right now because I only have cool at 6. But when possible, I tend to level up my cool more. Why do I recommend going into cool? Let's start there, or at least let's wrap it up there. There's 3 things that I find vital to in the cool tree. The first being is cold-blooded. I would max that out whenever you get the chance to, but what I really care to max out is will to survive, which increase all resistance by 5% per stack of cool. So these two go hand in hand because the more enemies you kill, the more stacks you get. So just get that whenever you can. The next point I would recommend is getting critical condition. Why critical condition? Because it increases your duration of your cold-blooded. Once again, pretty self-explanatory. If your cold-blooded lasts longer, your resistance lasts longer. If your resistance is lasting longer, your movement speed is lasting longer. You can't get any better than that. Now, aside from that, any other perk you decide to get in cool is entirely up to you. I don't really recommend getting too much perks into here until you've gotten all the other necessary perks into your other trees that you would like. But definitely pick these 2 perks up whenever you can. Once again, this is an early game build. I don't expect you to be able to get all these perks. So I'd recommend starting with body and reflexes. Once you get maybe Regeneration and Invincible, I'd recommend just going into Reflex and getting the necessary perks you want to grab first in Reflex for blades. Once again, I started with Sting like a bee because it only made sense for me to be able to swing faster. Whatever you want to get is entirely up to you. Now, another tree that's not necessary for you to grab, but I recommend getting a little perk point into is intelligence and going into the quick hand. You don't have to level up intelligence at all if you don't want to. You don't have to. But I recommend going in there and getting the quick hand so that way you can get some of these perks from quick hands. Like for instance, in combat you can deal more damage to enemies far away, so that way when they come you can set them up with the instant finisher. It's not a necessity and it's not a tree that I'd even recommend you looking at unless you have points to waste. So we're not even going to talk about it too much. Just know that quick hand is a viable option when you have perks and attribute points to spend. With that being said, we're going to transition into gear. So this is V, this is my V, this is Valencia. As far as gear go, I'd recommend just getting any melee weapon you feel comfortable with. In my case, once again, this build is focused on blades, so I went with a katana. Any katana you find on the street will suffice, and you can even do a mission to get a higher damaging katana. I'm not going to really spoil that mission for you, but once you've talked to Rogue and you've completed a certain quest, there will be someone in the afterlife that you can talk to, and he's going to ask you to deliver a package. That's all I'm going to say. I don't really want to spoil that quest for you. Just talk to him and you get a cool looking katana there. As far as gear go, I haven't really found too much trouble just picking whatever I feel like wearing. Once again, my armor is low, but I haven't found too much trouble in surviving these low level to mid tier missions doing that. However, just pick whatever you want to pick that makes your character's attributes, their stats, go up. Or you can just do like me and just wear whatever the hell you want to make yourself look cool. One thing I'd recommend, however, is getting this Melee weapon right here is called the Cottonmouth, and the reason why I recommend getting it is because if some missions will require you to be non-lethal. You can either use your fist or you can use a melee weapon. I just say use this melee weapon. You get 366 DPS, and it's already non-lethal because it's a cane, and you can use that as your non-lethal option. But as far as that go, any any blade you want to use, a machete, a dagger, whatever, it's up to you. My preference is a katana. Cyberware. What do I recommend for cyberware? Cyberware, I don't really have any recommendations for cyberware, believe it or not. I don't really have any recommendations for cyberware, but I'd say just build it the way you want to. Okay. I lied. Any software that increases armor, you should pick up because the more armor you have, the better you are at surviving. Blah 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 blah. That's a no-brainer. Sorry, should have said that. Anything that increases armor, you should definitely get. Obviously, in the early game, you won't have a lot of stuff that does that, or you won't have a lot of software available to you. So, pick and choose at your risk what you want to get and what you want to waste your money on. Once again, I told you for my arms, I've picked up the Mantis Blade just to have as another alternative to dealing damage. You don't have to, it's just what I do and it's just what I prefer. With that being said, I've also grabbed the Adrenaline Booster because the more stamina I have, the better. And recovery, you'll find out will work hand in hand with a melee build. Being able to recover more stamina, being able to recover back your health while in battle is crucial. So I picked this up. Once again, it's not really a recommendation. I'm just telling you my thought process and what I decided to do. Also, I picked this one up, Micro Generator.